Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Om Hare Krishna. Jai. Jai. Hare Krishna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Yakshurundalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitam Jena Bhuttam Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Bande Ham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakanshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusite Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vansakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Jaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara, Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta praya shabadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhaviti Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, it becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swashayanam Mahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, as Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Surabhyaya Namaha. Om Surabhyaya Namaha. Om Surabhyaya Namaha. Mukam karoti vasaram pangum langayate girim yatripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataram. Yatripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataram. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to our morning Bhagavatam class, which is Canto 7, Chapter 5, entitled Prahlad, the Saintly Son of Hiranyakashipu, text 52. Dharmam artham cha kamam cha nitaram chanupurvashaha praradayochatu rajan prasrita vanataya cha dharmam altam sakamam cha itaram chanupurvashaha praradayochatu rajan prasrita vanataya cha dharmam artam chakamam cha itaram chanupurvashaha praradayochatu rajan prasrita vanataya cha dharmam artam chakamam cha itaram chanupurvashaha praradayochatu rajan prasrita vanataya cha.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha.
Nitaram chanupurvashaha.
Nitaram chanupurvashaha.
Radayo chaturajan.
Radayo chaturajan.
Rashvitavanataya cha.
Rashvitavanataya cha.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha.
Nitaram chanupurvashaha.
Nitaram chanupurvashaha.
Radhaya chitorajan.
Radhaya chaturajan.
Rashvitavanataya cha.
Rashvitavanataya cha.
Ladies, Mataji's.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha. Nitaram chanupurvashaha. Radhaya chaturajan. Rashvitavanataya cha. Dharmamartham cha kamam cha. Nitaram chanupurvashaha. Radhaya chaturajan. Rashvitavanataya cha. Dharmamartham cha kamam cha. Nitaram chanupurvashaha. Radhaya chaturajan. Rashvitavanataya cha.
Dharmam, mundane occupational duty. Artham, economic development. Cha, and kamam, sense gratification. Cha, and nitaram, always. Cha, and anupurvashaha, according to order, or from the beginning to the end. Praradaya, unto Prahlad Maharaj. Uchatuhu, they spoke. Rajan, O king. Prasrita, who was humble. Avanataya, and submissive. Cha, also. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Thereafter, Sanda and Amarka systematically and unceasingly taught Prahlad Maharaj, who was very submissive and humble, about mundane religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Purport. There are 4 processes for human society: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, and they culminate in liberation. Human society must follow a process of religion to advance. And on the basis of religion, one should try to develop his economic condition so that he can fulfill his needs for sense gratification according to the religious rules and regulations. Then liberation from material bondage will be easier to attain. That is the Vedic process. When one is above the stages of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, one becomes a devotee. He is then on the platform from which he is guaranteed not to fall again to material existence. Yat gadva na nivartanti. As advised in the Bhagavad Gita, if one transcends these 4 processes and is actually liberated, one engages in devotional service. And then he is guaranteed not to fall to to material existence again. Translation again. Thereafter, Sangha and Amarka systematically and unceasingly taught Prahlad Maharaj, who was very submissive and humble, about mundane religion, economic development, and sense gratification. These four principles, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, they come up again and again in our Vedic literatures, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they need to be understood in the proper way. Here, of course, we see how the teachers of Prahlad Maharaj are teaching him about mundane, mundane occupation, mundane economic development, etc., ultimately for the purpose of sense gratification. And that type of dharma, artha, kama, moksha is actually rejected, just like Krishna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam saranam braja. That is the goal and the objective, to give up all materially motivated activities or purposes and simply to surrender to Krishna in pure devotional service. However, because that is not so easily and immediately attained, Shastra does give guidelines in the area of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. We were discussing yesterday a little bit how dharma needs to be understood on two levels. The eternal dharma, which is also, of course, mentioned in the very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Savaya pumsam paro dharma, the supreme dharma, topmost dharma for all living entities, is to engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Savaya pumsam paro dharma, dato bhakti radhoksaje haitukiya pratihata, yayatma suprasivati. Prabhupada explains how when we take up that supreme dharma, which is bhakti, devotional service, then by following the injunctions of Shastra in the matter of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, we will be able to meet all of our different necessities. Material necessities. We do have material necessities. When we become devotees, when we take up the process of spiritual life, it's not that we negate material necessities, but we learn to fulfill our material necessities by following what is prescribed in the Shastra. In other words, our guiding principles, are always meant to be in line with Shastra. And of course, what Prahlad Maharaj's teachers are doing, what they're teaching is not in line with Shastra. And therefore, although Prahlad Maharaj, as an ideal student, he's very submissive and very respectful, he's hearing them, but he has, he already has superior knowledge. As we know, he has superior knowledge of bhakti, devotional service. So, just like in the Bhagavatam also, sarva kama dugamahi, it is mentioned, kama. Kama can be understood either as sense gratification or meeting our material necessities of life. So, dharma per se, dharma is rejected when it is for sense gratification. Dharma is accepted when the ultimate objective is to actually become freed or liberated from all kinds of activities of sense gratification. So therefore, the importance for all of us as devotees to know about Dharma, to know Shastra. Sometimes there is confusion in the material world. It's quite understandable that there will be confusion, especially in Kali Yuga. But in the context of devotees, we'll present the argument. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu focused on bhakti. We are followers of the bhakti movement. We are fortunate to have received and understood what is the Yuga Dharma for the sage of Kali, which is the chanting of the holy name. Therefore, why we don't just concentrate on that? Why do we have to bother about other things? So in one conversation, Prabhupada explained how yes, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially in Jagannath Puri, that's his whole Leela and pastime, he was fully, totally absorbed in Krishna praying. And he was constantly chanting the holy name, remembering so many different pastimes of the Lord, and Ramanandarai and Sarup Damodar were helping him actually in his ecstasy by quoting so many verses. But then Prabhupada made the following statement: but we will not imitate Lord Chaitanya. We will not falsely, artificially, and for that matter, we will also not imitate Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, who could spend 22 hours or more in chanting the holy name. And therefore, Dharma, Artha, Kama needs to be understood in its proper context. There is a need for economic development. As a matter of fact, it's one of the Vedic sciences we were making reference to. But that's why, again, it's important we have to hear from Shastra what is actually economic development, isn't it? What is the ideal economic development that will more quickly, this is for, of course, the Grihasthas. Brahmacharis don't have to worry about economic development. Vanaprastha also, and sannyasis, only householders. But that if we understand what is meant to be the ideal and the prescribed economic development, which we discussed briefly yesterday, Krishi Gorakshavanijam, Vaishya Karma Svabhavajam, that is Krishna's system. That is Krishna's system for householders in particular, to meet their ideal way to meet their basic material necessities of life in such a way that it will favor, that it will facilitate, that it will, as we used Prabhupada's term yesterday, that it will accelerate that type of economic development based on Krishi Goraksha will accelerate our ability to actually develop spiritual qualities. It's in one sense, it's like obvious, but in modern day society, it is totally unknown. Of course, ordinary people. But the unfortunate thing is that it's also unknown to our own devotees, largely, So, Kama and Artha, or Artha and Kama, with Artha we fulfill our material necessities of life. When we follow the prescribed activities and method for, let's say, gaining money, then that process in itself is intimately or directly connected with the supreme dharma. That's why, again, our more recent acharyas Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and our own ISKCON founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, they introduced, we don't see it so much previously, at least I've not come across it, they introduced the word Daiva Varnashrama, isn't it? Because sometimes people say, well, why should we engage in material activities? Varnashrama is material. It's material if you have that consciousness. But actually, some very interesting and important statements made by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who explains how if someone serves within that God-created, system, material system, but if his mind or his intention is to please Krishna, which is the basis, then all of those so-called material activities, they don't incur or create karmic reaction. When we properly understand what is meant to be the activities, the form of economic development, which is prescribed in the Shastra, which was especially demonstrated by the residents of Vrindavan, in particular Krishna and Balaram, then those type of activities, when performed in the proper consciousness, this is devotional service. It doesn't create karma, isn't it? So sometimes we have a tendency, it's natural in the material world, to go to one extreme or to the other extreme. Bhagavatam is giving us that proper middle point, we could say, or balance, isn't it? Obviously, householders, they have to work, they have to make money. But when Krishna speaks about prescribed duties, we should try to read this or understand this term, prescribed duties, as prescribed Vedic duties, Vedic subscribed duties, Vedic prescribed duties. Very different from what we accept, what we have learned to accept in modern day society. Because the vast majority of so-called duties or professions or occupations today in the world, they're not Vedic prescribed duties, isn't it? We want to do everything that's in line with Shastra, because Krishna is giving Shastra, and he knows what is best for us to meet our basic needs and necessities of life. And therefore, although the essence is bhakti, the essence is pure devotional service, we can learn to perform that pure devotional service with this material body, isn't it? And within the prescribed process or system that Krishna has given. So this is a major challenge, I would say, for all of us as devotees, especially those who are householders, because householders are the ones that have to make money, that have to deal with these two aspects of artha and kama, isn't it? Therefore, the need, very urgent need for all of us to more closely study what is given to us in the pages of the Bhagavatam. Actually, one of my godbrothers recently, I'm still waiting for that book called The Perfect Society. What's his name? Jayananda? No, something like that. Very senior Prabhupada disciple. He joined way back in 1966. He was preaching in foreign countries. Very thank you. Dayananda, thank you. Dayananda Prabhu. He actually put together, maybe a year and a half ago, he started a journal. Newsletter called, what's the name of that newsletter? something like by Varnashrama Dharma newsletter. It only appeared twice. He published only twice after 6 months. And then he decided to put everything in his book. It's on Amazon actually. And the title of that book is The Perfect Society, because he took it directly from, this is seventh canto when we, a little further, right? From chapter 11 to 15. Those are grihasthas and who have not read and thoroughly studied chapter 11 to 16, 11 to 15, the 5 chapters spoken by Narada Muni on the subject matter, will generally have more difficulty understanding about dharma. So our goal, our objective is not only to strive for perfection on the spiritual level, that is our topmost or highest objective, but also we should know that there is also this concept of perfect society. There is this concept of perfect family life. Only if it is connected with Krishna, isn't it? And that is why when we begin to understand Krishna's material arrangement in terms of varnashrama, here this is the context of education. The guidelines in terms of Vedic education are also very elaborately in detail given in the Shastra. And this is the type of education, this is the type of economy, this is the type of governance, isn't it? How we should organize our communities, how we should organize our society. These are all very scientific instructions based on scientific, you could say, principles. I mean, the whole, naturally, isn't it? Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whatever he will teach, whatever he will instruct, is perfect. We simply have to hear it properly, receive it, and then apply according to what Krishna is giving. So, in other words, we are meant, we as devotees, we as a society, are meant to show what is perfection. Perfection, pure devotional service is perfection on the spiritual level. And society arranged according to the proper understanding of Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, that is also perfect material system as well. In other words, we have perfection on these 2 levels, and the more we follow, then we will not have the kind of anxieties that people, and sometimes even our own devotees, struggle with, largely because we are not in line with what is prescribed actually in the Shastra. So the safest position for all of us is to hear nicely, to read and to study, and then in keeping with so many examples that are there in the Shastra, to follow in the footsteps of various great personalities. So I think everyone can relate to the fact that in modern day educational system, as presented here, everyone is being trained in the wrong way, and therefore devotees of Krishna especially have a major responsibility to actually introduce. We should introduce first and foremost amongst ourselves, and then we can introduce to others as well. I'm told that on Mondays the classes are a little shorter, so we can take some time for possible questions. Yes, 1, 2 hands are. First, Mike can come here, and then Mike should go on the Mataji side. Yes, yesterday I didn't see the hands of yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the enlightening class. Maharaj, I have heard somewhere that in the Vedic times, the ratio of the society was 1 Brahmana, 9 Kshatriyas, 90 Vaishyas, and 900 Shudras, like that. And then the rest of the society was like tribal and outcasts and those people.
I'm looking for that reference. Do you have it?
One devotee towards I don't have any essential reference, but it is logical work from the stand that they will be like, majority will be like workers in general. So my question, Maharaj, is that in today's society, as it is said, in general people are like even below Shudras and like because there is no Varnashrama and all that. So statistically looking, if you see the now huge number of people who come to the temples, like because of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's great divine mercy, that many millions and millions of people are coming to the temples. And out of them, few become, take this process of sadhana bhakti and then they graduate. So Maharaj, my question is that, all this ideal example of the perfect society and this Daivi Varnashram, first of all, not everybody can understand, and beyond understanding to implement and to execute and to do requires leadership. Like as Prabhupada said, Srila Prabhupada said that, the Brahmanas, the head of the society has been formed in the shape of Brahmanas and sannyasis and all that. But the arms and the legs and the other parts are still together. So Maharaj, my question is that instead of talking at a broad level, if we have few leaders who can actually execute this, then it will be easier for the masses to follow. Just like in the outside world, few people drive the entire population towards their ideas. So do you see, Maharaj, in the short time or like how, whether these leaders are coming up in our society, ISKCON society, who can actually implement this? Because masses will not understand this.
Okay. If we understand this important, let's say, advice or instruction actually that Prabhupada gave us, which I was briefly mentioning yesterday, that in order for us to actually understand how to go about, let's say, organizing society, until and unless we establish Varnashram colleges, it will be, because both Gurukul and Varnashram colleges and the basic Vedic, traditional Vedic sciences are primarily meant to train leaders in society. Now, when we speak of leaders, basically in any community or in any society, we can easily observe also there are some natural leaders and the rest are meant to be followers. But actually both are meant to be qualified. So within the context of traditional Vedic education, formal education, there's two levels of education actually, formal and non-formal. So formal education, Prabhupada gives a nice definition of this in the 10th canto, chapter 11, you can look it up later on, text number 37, 10, 11, 37. Prabhupada speaks about academic education as being formal education for mainly Brahmanas. So who are the natural leaders in society? Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. Why are they natural leaders? Because so many people will actually depend on them in so many different ways. We depend on farmers for producing food. We depend on the Kshatriyas for giving protection. We depend on the Brahmanas for giving us knowledge. So unless we introduce the traditional sciences that are spoken about, briefly we mentioned this yesterday, then we will not so easily, I would say we are not, my limited observations, I don't see that we're training properly leaders to deal and understand the modern day system, the context in which we are finding ourselves. Not only do we need, you see, from Brahmanas, of course, Prabhupada's whole purpose in going to America, as he pointed out was to put a head back on society, to train brahmanas. But once proper brahmanas are trained, they will naturally, automatically train individuals who will become kshatriyas, who will become vaishyas, and who will become good shudras. You see, within that system of varna and ashrama, everyone, including shudras, are actually very elevated souls. In the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni, he gives a list of like 9 qualities of a shudra. 9 qualities of a shudra. That you find that in, I think, chapter 11, canto number 7. And two of those qualities is satyam and saucham, which are 2 of the basic, 2 of the 4 pillars of dharma, honesty and cleanliness. You want to have a servant who's going to be honest and clean. And people have servants to actually keep the house clean. So, yeah, unless we, if we only limit ourselves to the, let's say, spiritual dimension and forget about the other dimension of life, then that will create, and is creating, I would say, an imbalance. Because we have these two levels, these 2 realities. We're sitting here in this body, this material body, and this body has some basic material necessities, although we are the spirit soul within the body. So in a broader sense, society, there's so many material necessities and arrangements that are, again, prescribed in the Shastra. So these are basically the 2 types of individuals in any society, qualified leaders. In the Vedic culture, they are the Dvijas. Dvijas are the Brahmanas, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. And, where are we teaching within our society about the qualities of Kshatriyas? We're not, because until we have Varnashram college, it won't happen. Some leadership courses are there, but very limited, I would say. It's a big topic, but definitely we can improve a lot on that. Microphone should go on that side somehow. Yeah. Right side, Prabhu. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Koti Vandanam, speak accept my most humble and respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet as servant of your servant. Thank you Maharaj for this entertainment. Maharaj, today we talked about dharma, and Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva dharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. And aham tvam sarva papeva mokshishami ma suja. And in 9 stages of bhakti, namely Shraddha, Sadhusa, Bhajan Kriya, Anasangati, Nishtavati, Asati, Bhava Prem, which is the minimum stage, where we can surrender all our dharma and engage in loving devotion service to the Krishna.
Could everyone hear that?
What was your question?
This verse, Sarva Dharman Parityaja,
Yeah.
at which stage of bhakti in the 9 stages can we properly implement that we can render pure devotional service? Among the 9 stages, at which stage Sarva Dharman Parityaja one can actually properly apply?
Among the 9 stages.
Shraddha, Sadhu,
Yes,
Sangha.
prima, yeah.
So she's asking which stage one will be able to live by this verse properly.
At which stage we can abandon all material dharma? That's the question.
Which is the minimum stage of bhakti, where we can surrender all our dharma and engage in devotional service to Krishna.
See, we need to understand dharma that is materially motivated, that dharma we should abandon. But dharma, like the verse that's there in the first canto, the param dharma is bhakti. That we don't abandon. Actually, in the early days when they translated the book in Indonesia, it was that verse ended up, going to the Ministry of Religion in Indonesia, and they banned ISKCON. Yeah, for many, many years. So it needs to be, because they still follow basic principles of Dharma, because they have different ministries, not only for Islam, but also for Hindu. So that needs to be understood properly. The same word Dharma, when it is materially motivated, that we should give up. Dharma, when it is pure devotional service, obviously, that should never be given up. And even though we may attain the pure level of pure devotional service, that's also explained by our acharyas, one needs to work, one will work within that system. In any event, there's very few people who will attain that high level of liberation, and therefore, again, I think I might have mentioned that yesterday, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes the following, I would say, profound statement, that Varnashrama is for the Vaishnavas in their conditioned state. We tend to think that, well, now we have become Vaishnavas, we are totally liberated. That would be so nice. But in a very important conversation, Prabhupada was having to argue with one devotee who was telling, but Prabhupada, we're devotees, we're Vaishnavas, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, chant Hare Krishna, practice pure devotional service. Why do we have to bother with Varnashram, which is material? And for those who have read, you will remember Prabhupada's reply, it is not so easy to be Vaishnava. It is not at all easy to be Vaishnava. Then Prabhupada continues in the same conversation right after this, in order to become Vaishnava, you have to follow the principles of Varnashrama. Because by nature, Varnashrama, which is created by Krishna, leads us gradually, systematically, towards elevated goodness, isn't it? And it is only when we are on the level of goodness that we more easily can practice devotional service. As also in the second chapter, the first canto, Divinity and Divine Service. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangha se jayate. So first we come to the level of goodness. For the vast majority of people, some rare soul might immediately jump beyond the mode of goodness, but that's very rare. Therefore, that system is there. And that system needs to be understood in terms of Krishi Goraksha as well, in terms of economic development. Yes, yes, Hare Krishna. Microphone is right here. Yeah. We have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, for a very wonderful class. I was thinking, Maharaj, as a preacher, we have different roles to play. Like when I am giving session, I may be acting as a Brahmana. When we are doing some management meeting for our center, we are acting as a Kshatriya. When we are doing fund collection, we are acting as a Vaishya. And similarly, when we are doing Mahatrini, we are acting as a Shudra, in one sense. So when we are playing different roles, it is always difficult to remember I am Jivan Sarupa, Krishna Nityadas, and I am servant of Krishna. So in all these situations, when I am acting for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna, how do I remember my internal position? Hare Krishna.
Yes. I will answer in the following way. When we live in a temple, then yes, at any moment we are called upon to be either a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra in terms of activity. The whole concept and application of the Varna and Asrama becomes more a reality, more a necessity, more real when we're living out in what we call the material world. When we are living out, interacting, then we have to take on generally a particular role, which is meant to be according to our nature. So, in other words, there are two situations that we're looking at. On the one hand, those of us who are devotees living in the temple, then yeah, our primary understanding is that we are eternal servants of Krishna, and that whatever may be needed, isn't it? We do the needful, so to speak. So sometimes we may play a role of a brahmana, or as you mentioned, you know. Generally, it becomes more prominently, let's say, understood and followed when we are not living in the temple and where we have to take on some particular role or responsibility and interact with general society. So maybe to a large extent, one of the reasons why we have less maybe interest or less acquaintance with Varnashrama is that we are to a large extent still very closely connected with temple, which is okay. At the same time, Prabhupada, if I can I'll just finish on this point actually, which is quite important. It's explained nicely in a small essay that Prabhupada wrote way back in probably before many of you were born, 1956, called Gita Nagari. Who has read Gita Nagari? Who knows about Gita Nagari? Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, so Gita Nagari is a very important essay. It's on the folio, where Prabhupada speaks about 4 phases, 4 movements, to introduce the mission of Lord Chaitanya, to spread, the Sankirtan movement. So he calls the first phase as Sankirtan movement based on the holy name and books. He calls the second phase spiritual, temple worship movement, establishing temples where we have beautiful deities and devotees can come and people can be introduced to who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Number 3 is, Prabhupada calls it spiritual initiation movement, congregational preaching. We train up individuals to become more committed and they eventually will be taking initiation like that. The 4th movement, which is missing, which Prabhupada speaks about way back then, he called it the classless society movement, which means Varnashrama. And by classless society, we need to understand it as Daiva Varnashrama. That regardless of your position as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, we're all engaged in serving Krishna. We're all engaged in practicing devotional service. Krishna is the center, is the focus of our lives. So that Daiva Varnashrama is like, especially, we can practice to some extent in our temples, but we've been focused mainly on the first 3, and therefore the 4th one we have yet to take up largely. We have a few communities here and there, and therefore that's why there's less clear understanding of how to proceed. So therefore, in our temples, in these first 3 phases, we every day we're playing different roles. But as we are meant to introduce the fourth wave or the 4th movement, then we will see things in a slightly different manner. Although, Prabhupada mentioned, for Vaishnavas, we should regard this whole system as like a drama or a play. We accept a particular role knowing that, hey, I'm not really that, I'm not really Brahmana or Kshatriya, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, but for the proper functioning of society, we accept these different roles. When we live in outside society, it's different, slightly different, quite a bit different, I would say, in a temple. Yeah? Okay. Yeah.